Right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to a Reimagining Retirement interview. And this morning we are talking with Beth Foreman, who is a good friend of mine. We've been friends since college. We were roommates in college. And it's just a delight to have Beth on the interview program today. And Beth is a writer, a teacher, a speaker, a visual faith coach who is passionate about sharing God's grace with women, encouraging them in their daily messes, and walking with them to grow deeper relationships with God. She has published more than 100 articles, Bible studies, and devotionals, and she is working to release her first novel, which is a dual timeline story about two women who are separated by centuries but connected by a ring and God's grace. When she isn't playing with words, she leads women's Bible studies at church, walks along nearby Lake Michigan. I don't know if you walk in the lake, but you walk along the lake, reads, doodles, and hangs out with her family. And Beth is most thankful for her flawed but grace-filled life as wife, mother, and grandmother. And you can read her work and sign up for her newsletter at bethforeman.com. And I'll put that link at the end of my newsletter. So welcome, Beth. It's so great to have you to discuss goals with us.
One of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
And thank you, Judy. Thanks for that intro. And it's always like weird to hear yourself introduced because it's like, oh,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
it's accurate. And you've obviously set goals in your life and you've achieved quite a bit. So that is what we want to hear about today.
Well, wonderful. Sometimes I think I set goals, but sometimes these things just kind of happened. And I look back and think, how did that happen?
Yeah.
I didn't really plan on that, which is really part of the fun, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm sure I can't imagine anybody who's had their life work out exactly as they planned. There's always other things and God's will come into it when we didn't really realize where we were headed.
For
But
sure.
yeah. But I
Yeah,
think
actually,
goals
that's
is
what.
important.
What's that?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking because I had my devotional this morning, which was a total God thing. I love when this happens. It was focused on Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. And I was thinking about that song we used to sing in Sunday school about the wise man builds his
Yeah.
house. You know,
Yeah.
I should not sing. That's not one of the things I can do. But it's like, yeah, we make our plans and we figure things out, but it's, we give them to the Lord, right?
Yeah. What else can we do?
And
Yeah.
he works with them in, ways that we wouldn't even imagine.
Right.
So,
I agree.
yeah.
Yep. Well, you wrote a couple blog posts back in January on setting goals. And well, you wrote three of them, I think. And when I read those recently, I realized, oh, she has a whole lot more going on with goal setting than I ever did. So I thought it would be useful to talk with you about setting goals in and approaching retirement, because people they're probably tired of setting goals. You're working in a career for decades, and you're always setting goals, and somebody's always checking on the achievement of them, and then you set new goals. And I can imagine people just get tired of setting goals. They just want to kick back and relax. So you started your first post saying, so why? Why should we set goals? So how about we start there? Why should somebody who is considering retirement, who doesn't really need to set goals for a job or to earn income anymore, why should they bother?
Oh, that's the $1 million question. And I happen to live with somebody who doesn't really like to set goals. So, um, I think, and I think because retirement is one of those seasons where everything shifts. You leave this busy job and you go into just a new season, but it could happen at any time, like graduating from college or from high school, starting a family, just getting married.
Yep.
All these are different seasons where I think it's really healthy to just do some reflection, just to think about things. And I think we're not naturally, well, some people aren't naturally inclined to do that, to like self-reflect. So doing something like goal setting seems to be sort of a, I don't know if I dare say it, but it's like, it's almost like a kind of having counseling, because you have to think things through. You have to set visions, or, make plans and figure out what are your priorities, and you might not know what they are, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's, and honestly, if our, like, I know I'm speaking for myself here, but I think it's true for most of us, our default is to do things selfishly. I think
Absolutely.
there's a
Yeah,
phrase like we're all navel gazers, we're all just like, it's just about me, right?
yeah,
So if I don't really think intentionally about what I want to do each day, then it can easily slip into kind of a laziness of, I just going to do what feels good to me.
right,
Okay.
right.
And in retirement, it might be, I'm just going to sleep late. I'm going to eat whatever I want because I'm just tired of having to do, and watch whatever I want on TV. I can see how that could easily slip into something really unhealthy,
Yeah. And
where
you just you would just develop bad habits of that's your life.
yes,
And that would be unhealthy at best and discouraging and unfulfilling also, I think.
I think so too. I mean, we want to think about what is our purpose in life. I mean, why are we here? And from a Christ-centered perspective, it's like, what am I here to do? I'm here to love the Lord and love my neighbor,
Yeah,
not love myself.
yeah, yeah. Well, you can love yourself, but that should be
Yeah,
that should be top of the list.
right,
Yeah,
right. Good point. Good point.
yeah,
Yeah. But the default position is to love myself. And what do
yeah, yeah. You're right.
so the loving the Lord and loving your neighbor takes some thought.
Yeah, and it takes some effort too. And
Hmm.
yeah,
For sure, for sure. So that's kind of my why. I'm
okay,
also like why I would recommend it. I just feel like it's just a good self-reflection. And if you don't, like, I personally like to write it all down, like, all this goal setting stuff. I get really geeky about that, but you don't necessarily have to. I mean, you just need to verbalize it. So that
yeah,
might be just talking to a friend, talking to your spouse, talking, just to somebody.
yeah. Good point. Yeah. So you noted three types of goals in your post. You said they're object-oriented goals, progress-oriented, and system goals. So can you explain what those each are?
Yes, it's kind of, that's definitely came, I can't even remember which, I follow all these productivity people, read books and all that
Yeah,
stuff. And I thought this was interesting because I think, well, whenever we think about goal setting, we think, okay, I want to lose 5 pounds, or I want to run a 5K, or, I want to save $5,000 for this trip. We think about that. And that's what this particular person was calling an object goal. You have a clear destination.
yeah,
And that's what we always think about with goal setting.
right,
Okay,
right,
I'm here, but I want to be there. So
right.
that's all great. And you probably have heard about how that's supposed to be, actionable and measurable and
Yes,
all those.
smart goals. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. So that's good, but not all goals are really, can you even necessarily reach that destination? So the progress goals, I particularly like that as a writer because, for example, one of my goals is that I want to get my book published. Okay. It's, yeah, all right. That's out of my control, especially, I mean, if I self-publish, that's one thing, but to
yeah,
have a traditional publisher is, I mean, I can do all kinds of things to get
right,
myself there, but it's out of my
yeah,
control, whether or
yeah,
not somebody wants the book, right?
right.
So I set progress goals that are like giving me the path to that object,
Hmm.
but then I can see the progress that I'm making, because it could be little things. It's like I'm gonna, get the editor. I want to, have this book edited. I want to revise. I want to write, the, the letter of recommendation. I want to do all these things that are going to help me get to that object goal, but I can measure the progress.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about graphs and, like doing that kind of thing. But that's kind of the progress goal. And then the system goal basically is a fancy way of saying habits. It's like set yourself some systems that set you up for success for that object goal. So for me, it's sit down and write, 1,000 words a day or 2,000 or whatever it might be. If I don't have those system goals and I don't have that object goal, I will be writing this book until I'm 90 years old. So
Wait, by the way, I can't wait to read your book. I'm very excited about that.
well, I can't wait to read it either. The finished version, but thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So anybody watching this, please make a note of Beth's book and order it when it comes out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're on the second draft here after an editor, so
Okay, good, good.
it's a work in progress.
Yep. So, okay, object-oriented goals. I remember back when I was working a long time ago in IT, I was a project leader, so we'd have a project, and the goal was to complete the project, with on time and within budget. And that always kind of freaked me out. I always thought, whoa, it seemed like such a far away big goal. And then I learned to break it into small pieces and to measure the progress along those lines, and then the goal would just happen.
Yes.
So is that the idea?
Definitely. That's it. I think the quote is something about how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, it's like, which I always thought that was such a strange metaphor. But anyway, it's memorable, but that's true. It's like you just have to break it down into smaller pieces. And I've always done that too. When I was in school, I had 1,000-page book to read. I knew I had, 2 weeks to read it. I had to read 250 pages a day.
Right.
So the only way to get there.
Yeah.
So yep, that's pretty much it. And what it looks like for each person is going to be different, right?
Yeah. So do people handle these types of goals differently, would you say? Or is it generally the same process or the same pattern?
That's a really good question. I think everybody's going to do it, whatever works for them. Because if you're not really methodical about it and you're not like a writer and you want to put it down on paper, it's going to be in your head somewhere. And maybe you're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to, those goals though that aren't well defined, whether it's object goals or progress goals, then they just become kind of cloudy and just like so I'm a real I really believe in writing them down. And what it looks like for everybody and how you measure it's going to be different, right? I mean, it could be as simple as just having your calendar and just putting something simple down on the calendar for each day to reach that goal,
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
Is there a progression in setting these up? Most people start with a object goal, then a progress goal, and then systems, or is it random?
I think it depends on what you're goal setting for. So at least the way I've heard is if you're going to start something brand new, like say you in retirement, want to learn something that you've never tried before. Because we know that's good for our brains, right?
Yes.
So like, I'll just say, like just say watercolor or something. If you want to learn watercolor, all right, you could set an object goal, like you want to paint a painting as a gift for somebody, right? Well, how are you going to get there? It's the process. I think you could have the object goal, but maybe you just want to learn it for the sake of learning it. It's not like you're trying to produce something.
Right.
And so that's where I think it just varies. So you might just set up system goals like, hey, 2 or 3 times a week, I'm going to paint for an hour.
Yeah.
And
And it happens.
yeah, and then and I'm gonna sign up for a watercolor class at the local art center. I'm gonna watch on Skillshare or YouTube or whatever and learn some techniques. So, but just to say you want to learn watercolor, there's a lot of things I do that with. It's like I want to learn this, I want to learn this, but I don't really, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm
And
not committing.
right. And maybe that's what we find out, that if we're not terribly motivated to do it, even if we think we should, maybe that shouldn't be a major goal of ours.
Right. And that brings you back to, you're knowing yourself
Yeah.
and figuring out what is it and why do I want to do this? Why
Yeah.
do I want to learn watercolor?
Right. Right. I about a year ago, I thought, okay, I need to relearn Spanish. I took Spanish all through high school, a couple years in college even, and I've never used it. So I started doing Duolingo every day to just kind of beef up my Spanish knowledge. And I was in that habit for almost a year, I think. And then I don't know, somehow we went on vacation. I just stopped doing it. And frankly, I don't miss it, but I keep thinking I should get back to that because maybe I will need Spanish someday and
Right, right.
done it. So it's obviously not that important a goal for me, or I wouldn't
Well,
stop.
right. And I think that's why any goal setting system, whatever you want to call it, will always say you have to identify your why.
Yeah,
And you know, it's like, I think for me too, like one of the things, I've always felt like I want to stay in shape. I want to be, able fit and all these things. Okay,
right.
that's great. But when I started to identify my why, which is I want to be able to run on the beach with my grandchildren
Yeah,
for a long time
yeah, yeah,
and, play in the water and do all
yeah,
that, then
yeah,
it suddenly has just a richer,
yeah, yeah,
um, I have a richer why.
yeah. That's perfect example. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's possible to set up good systems and still not know exactly where they're going, which would be
Hmm.
which would be how I mostly lived my life. I didn't really I don't know if I had terribly many long-term goals until about the last 10 or 15 years, but I think I had reasonable habits. I worked out. I'm like you. I always wanted to be in shape. I always I put daily to-do lists and I always do most of them. And so I think I have decent systems, but I've pretty much let the big stuff happen, whatever. Is do you think is that common, or should I have had better object-oriented goals a long time ago?
Well, that's a tough question. I think it's really
I don't want to put
common.
you on the spot here.
No, but I think it's really common. I think especially when you're in busy seasons of life where, your goal is basically just to get your kids fed and clothed and raised. I mean, you had huge goals, raising a family. It's
True.
like that in and of itself. And then if you were working at all, and I mean, just basically your goal is just to get it through the day,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah.
And make sure that, nobody's like, bleeding at the end of the day
Or starving, which was rare. Yeah.
or starving. Yeah.
I don't think
So,
anybody starved.
I don't know, like I think, I was thinking about that too. I think I had things in the back of my mind that I hoped I would do at some point, but I just didn't have the time. Now that's, I kind of live with some regret, I'll be really honest,
Yeah.
because as a writer, I think, okay, I have peers, I have friends, colleagues right now they're in the thick of life with kids
Right.
and they're writing their books.
Yeah, I know.
And so there's a piece of
Absolutely
me
agree.
that is like, okay, because I started this journey long ago, like writing and playing with it and playing with it and playing with it. But I think I was not intentional about it. And I only have myself to blame for it. And I'm not saying, but part of me
Yeah.
is like, when I talk to younger people, I'm like, don't, miss
Yeah.
out. Don't waste your, I
Yeah.
hate
Yeah.
saying don't waste your time, but
Yeah.
if you want it and you set goals,
Right.
it can happen.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. I have similar regrets. I think back to 20 years ago, the first writers conference I went to, I sold a couple articles and I thought, awesome. And then I didn't do anything about it for 20 years. I'm thinking, okay, if I had pursued that then, I'd be so much further along now.
Yeah.
And I really don't know why I didn't. But it's frustrating.
Yeah, I can relate to that, but then at the same time when I hear you say that, it's always like, but God had another plan for you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he, used you for your community Bible study and, beautiful things that you gave your time to, because it wasn't like you were just sitting on the couch eating
No,
chocolates and watching TV.
I was not. That is true.
So
Yeah.
so I think I think it's easy to look back when you get to this
Right.
season of life and say, oh, if only I had done this,
Yeah.
I would be in a different place. But then I always ask myself, does it make any difference? Would I be any happier? Would, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole different story. But
Yes.
yeah. Yeah. But that I agree. I think it's very natural for people at our age or approaching retirement to look back and it's probably healthy to assess, how did we get here and what would we have done differently? And we still have 20 or 30 years ahead of us, so we can use that to productively manage our lives going forward, and that's the point of setting goals. I don't want to be 90 years old and look back and say, oh man, back when I was 65, I was thinking about this. What did I do for 20 years?
Exactly. Yeah, we have that perspective now, I think,
Right.
that
Right.
comes with age and looking back, and the past 20 years were busy years,
Yes.
and the next 20 years could look very different.
Yeah.
And we still have wonderful, minds, sharp minds,
Mhm.
clear thinking, and Lord willing, that will, last.
Right.
And I always think about people that are, I look up to, writers and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
creators and artists that are older, and it's like, that's awesome,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
still doing their thing.
Yeah. I know. And writing is something we could do till we're 100 if we still have
Right.
the mental capacity. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So I do think it's helpful to be intentional about it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's definitely helpful. And in all of this, I one of my favorite books for writing is Stephen Pressfield. I don't know if you've ever read The War of Art.
No. No. Interesting.
And yes, it's, and this is obviously geared to people that are creatives and all that, but there's always this war, of producing this creative thing and actually doing it. And
Right.
one of his quotes, I have to look at it to make sure I get it right. He says, most of us have two lives, the lives we live and the lives we are capable of living. And I find that really interesting.
Yeah.
And so
Interesting.
to turn that back to Christ-centered lives and, fearing God and loving the Lord, it's like he has created us with gifts.
Yeah.
How are we going to use them?
Yeah.
And
That's the question.
that's, I just still think the goal setting is just taking what gifts do you have and how can you use them to the glory of God and to your glory of your neighbor,
Yep.
um, and that just helps you be more intentional about it.
Right. That's good. I like that quote.
Yeah, it's really,
That's something else to ponder a little bit. Mhm.
it is. And there's just, I'm all, like I said, geeky about goal setting I don't do the measurement and all that. I'm not getting that, the
Yeah.
minutia of it.
You're
Like I
not
don't
quite
do
that busy.
spreadsheets. I don't do,
No.
no, it's more playing for me. I like, like doodling and
Yeah.
and writing the stuff down. But I don't know if we have time to get into it because one of the greatest things is this idea of instead of we typically set goals for the new year, like like for one whole year.
Mhm.
And that tends, I think there's a trend turning like to saying setting there was a book that was published called the 12-week year. So instead of setting yearly annual goals, you set quarterly
Okay.
goals
Okay.
for each of the seasons. And I love that. I just love the idea because every season is different. And,
Yes.
we're
Yeah.
heading into the summer season here in Michigan, and it's like I'm not nearly as quote productive because we only have a short summer.
Right. Right. And you want to enjoy it.
I
And
want to
that's,
be
yeah.
outside and on the beach and enjoying it. And so I don't write as much. So anyway, that's just something else to think about.
Okay.
The 12
Yeah.
week year.
Okay. The 12-week year. Yes. And okay, good. All right. So what would you have any recommendations for those who are considering retirement, coming up to retirement, are recently retired? What could they do if this is sounding like a good idea to them? What would you recommend they do to set some solid goals for the future?
Well, first I would say don't um, be open to that because if especially you've come out of a job like in sales or something like that where it's just been all about meeting like this
Right,
goal and this goal
right,
and this goal and you're just like I'm done with it. This can look completely different. This can be super creative, super fun. So be open to that. And I would first of all, for those who are believers, that you would pray and ask for guidance, but that you would actually think about it. Like instead of just shutting the door and saying, well, I'm not going to set goals, I'm done. I would, venture to say that really you are still setting goals, but they might be like, I'm just going to sit on the couch all day. No,
No.
right. You're still setting goals, but are these the ones you still have this rich and beautiful life? And how are you going to use your time? And so be open to that. And then, just either talk to somebody about it. And one of the things that I heard was really a good way of looking at this is that you think about like your vision for this season and you kind of break your life into, if you want to say it, like different parts, like your physical, like your health, your spiritual. Maybe you still want to have a very, academic life, like you challenge yourself with learning Spanish or
Yeah.
read. So break up your vision into smaller pieces
Hmm.
and like, okay, what do I want to do with the next 20 years when it comes to my relationships, my family, my finances,
Yeah.
my time. It's a wonderful adventure, I think,
Yeah.
to think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Good idea. So would it help to if you're not really if someone's not really up for setting major goals, does it help to set small goals and then the achievement of them, you may think, okay, that worked out. So maybe I'll set a little bit longer term goal. Is that useful, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. Because I don't know anybody that doesn't like to think, oh, I did that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So it may be just something is like, so I just think if you're newly retired and suddenly, I think that's the hardest time.
Mhm.
But I also think women can relate to this if you're like newly, like maybe you're going to stay home for a period of time and you've got a
Yeah.
little one, you do have more
Right.
like open space. I know
Right.
we've talked about that before because I spent a lot of years working, but I also spent a lot of years raising my family.
Right.
So I had to figure out how am I going to be
Yeah.
productive in the
Yeah.
day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
So if you are suddenly in this season where I just suddenly have all this time in front of me, and then you just start with something simple, it's like, hey, I think I want to, I've always wanted to learn how to play the piano. So I'm just going to get that beginner piano book out and I'm going to spend 10 minutes, every day plunking away at the piano.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, maybe I'm gonna so
Maybe-
there's not a need to set this big object goal like I want to play in this
Right. Right.
just I think so that's where I think those little system goals can be really fun,
Yeah.
just to kind of have some new things to fill
Right.
your day,
Yeah.
right?
And that's so important in so many ways for our mental capacity, our emotional capacity. Yeah, it's so helpful.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think even with, like something you can say, well, I've lived in this neighborhood, but I haven't been home enough to get to know my neighbors.
Yeah,
So that could be a wonderful
yeah,
system goal is that you maybe, plan on whatever it is, knocking on the door and just saying
yeah,
hi, bringing
yeah,
over a plate of cookies.
yeah,
It's just there's
yeah,
just endless opportunities for all
yeah,
kinds of things, but it has to be intentional. So
yeah,
I think it helps, at least it helps me to just really think it through and jot it down and say, oh, I really want to do that this week, you know?
yeah, yeah. So to summarize all of this good information, it sounds like you recommend that we just really take time to intentionally think through our time, our systems, and our goals, and then just be intentional. We have to be intentional about actually accomplishing what we plan to accomplish.
Hmm.
And what is that? Is is it that simple?
Well, I think it is that simple. And I think it's the place to start if you haven't done it before,
Right.
if you've
Right.
shied away from it and you think
Right.
about goal setting as just what you did in your job.
Yeah.
And now I have a free life and I can do whatever I want. So I do think it's that simple, but I also think it's a balance. It's like everything, that you end up you do have to hold all this really loosely because I can be hard on myself sometimes if I set some goals.
Yeah.
Um, and remembering that it's really easy to slip into, well, I can control this,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And if I just set the goals to be healthier, and then, what do lo and
Right.
behold, you end up with,
Right.
you're sick or,
Yeah.
there's just so much that's not in our control. So it's just really wise to hold it all really loosely,
Yeah. That's an excellent point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just to do it, but then to not be I have to be careful too, not to be tied to that
Yes. Yeah.
system where
Yeah.
you're not saying yes to things that God's putting in front of you, right?
Right. Yes. And you want to be flexible too in retirement. Like my husband, I might think, or he might think, let's go to the Botanic Gardens today. And I had a whole list of things I was going to do. But that's not always the right thing to do. So we need to be flexible. We need to say, sounds good.
Right.
I'm gonna invest in that relationship today rather than
Yeah.
check off all these things off my list.
Right. Right. Doesn't matter if you clean underneath your sink today or not,
Yeah. Yeah, it'll still be there tomorrow.
Yeah, sadly.
Well, thank you so much, Beth. This has been a fabulous discussion. I hope it's been encouraging to everybody. And once again, check out bethforeman.com, and I'll put the link to her website on my newsletter. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Judy. It was really fun to chat about this. I could
Yeah,
chat about this forever because
yeah,
it's just really fun. So thank you for having me and blessings to you in your ministry because I think it's just super important. I think a lot of people need to understand that we are in this new season, but it's filled with richness and blessings
yes.
and so much opportunity and joy to serve.
Oh,
So
thank you.
yeah,
All right. Well, enjoy Michigan, enjoy the summer, and we'll talk again soon.
thank you. I appreciate it. Have a
Thanks.
wonderful day.
You too.